One of the ways that L. Ron Hubbard actually told people about his Scientology research and technology was through lectures in the 1950s and 1960s. Some of these lectures were an hour long. Some of them were 90 minutes long, like the briefing course lectures. Well, they also became a source, not only for the technology of Scientology, but an income source for Scientology, where they could reproduce these lectures on cassette tape and then later CDs for people to purchase and be able to listen to them and also use them on Scientology training courses. Well, we're going to go over on this video here how these cassette tapes were produced in the 1980s and 90s and the various difficulties that happened, and David Miscavige's impossible standards that had to be met that resulted in abuse of staff members who were trying to just do their job. We have a great guest for you today. I think you'll find it interesting. Stay tuned. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our channel, Scientology Peeling the Onion. My name is Mark Fisher, and we're happy to have you here. As I mentioned in the brief introduction, L. Ron Hubbard did many lectures in the 1950s and 60s that are considered spiritual gospel or whatever for Scientology. And not only are they preserved, but they also were then reproduced for people so that they could make money. It was an income source for Scientology, where they were produced on cassette tape and then later on compact disc for people to purchase and use on their course materials and that type of thing. There was a lot of work that went into doing this in order to get these cassettes and these lectures produced and get them to the highest quality possible so that people could listen to them, because they were recorded in the 1950s and 1960s, and a lot of times there was a lot of background noise and coughing and different, it was difficult to hear. They were recorded on old recorders and things like that. So I was working at the international base at Gilman Hot Springs in the early 1980s, and I helped set up the different production lines that needed to be set up for the reproduction and mixing of these lectures by Hubbard so that they would meet his standards in order to be able to produce and to be sold. And a lot of, tens of thousands of dollars worth of equipment was purchased in order to set up mix lines and things like that. And I oversaw all of that for David Miscavige. I was the head of his office up there at the time. I was a corporate liaison office in charge. And so I set up a lot of these things along with the different technicians and personnel at Golden Era Studios. So these lectures were then used and then reproduced on a high-speed copy line so they could be then packaged and shipped out and make income for Scientology and also provide the materials for students and that type of thing. I've got a special guest that was actually involved with the production of these cassettes at Golden Era Productions in the 1990s, and it is Blown for Good, Marc Headley. Many of you know him, of course. He's got his own channel, and he's been speaking out for years, and he's known as Blown for Good, and he was intimately involved with a lot of these things. Now, Mark and I we did an interview, a live interview, over 2 years ago, and it was over 3 hours long. And so what I've done here is I've actually edited out different sections and different stories for this video here. And then you'll see me come in and make different introductions and commentary along the way. But I think you're going to find the stories interesting and entertaining. Mark is always an entertaining guest to have on here. One of the first things you're going to notice when you see me is that I'm 90 pounds, over 90 pounds less weight than I was when I did this interview with him over 2 years ago. So you're going to notice that right away. But anyway, I'm in good health and I'm doing well, and I'm definitely not missing those 90 pounds. So you're going to notice that right away. The first part of this interview here, I'm going to tell you, is that I was involved with getting Marc Headley up to the gold base in 1990. And this was right at the end of my time in the Sea Organization, because I was getting disenchanted with David Miscavige and I was getting ready to leave. But Marc Headley was 16, 17 years old, and I was involved with bringing him up to the base in order to come up to gold and work. And we're going to start off with that story here. You and I up in Gilman Hot Springs, because I was working for David Miscavige at the time as his corporate liaison in charge, and I basically was his guy at the gold base, and he was still the chairman of the board of Religious Technology Center. But anyway, we had to get personnel up to gold, up to that location, to basically get personnel for the manufacturing area for the cassette tape line. And I ran somebody named Cheryl Detchiff. I'm sure you remember her, Cheryl.
Yep.
And Claudia Olander.
Yeah.
And they were down in PAC trying to find people to get them who qualified to come up to the base. And one of those people happened to be you, right, Mark?
That's right. They had they'd been producing cassette tapes of L. Ron Hubbard's lectures for years at Golden Era Productions. And it had turned out that they had produced about 300,000 cassettes that you couldn't hear L. Ron Hubbard when he was talking. So they're considered overt products. They're bad cassettes. And these cassettes cost about $1 each. So that's essentially, they wasted $300,000 at least. There might be even more than that was wasted in terms of production masters and copies. And there's all sorts of, excuse me, there's all sorts of steps that happen before the cassette stage. And those were all badly produced as well. So they took every single person that made the cassettes except for one, and they sent them to the RPF, or they kicked them out of Scientology. And the one person that they kept was a woman by the name of Clarice Brousseau, or her maiden name was Barnett, and she was Shelley Miscavige's sister.
That's right.
And she was the only one who didn't go to the RPF or get kicked out of the Sea Org. And she used to be, like in the Sea Organization, she'd work with L. Ron Hubbard. Clarice and her sister both worked with L. Ron Hubbard when he first started the Sea Organization. And this woman, Clarice, I want to say she was in her late 30s at this point, maybe even 40s. She'd been in Scientology in the Sea Org for 2 decades or more. And she was a lieutenant junior grade. So she had bars and, rank, executive officer rank. And when I got there, she was like, petty officer, second class or something. She was like the next thing up from like a swamper, PO3 or PO2 or whatever it was. And so even though she didn't go to the RPF, she did get demoted substantially and was in big trouble.
Let me ask you a question. I want to ask you, okay, what was your first impression when you arrived at the gold base? Like, a lot of people, they didn't know where it was. It was a secret location, right? So when you arrived, did you arrive at night or day? Do you remember?
Yeah, I arrived at night. And in the Sea Organization, you don't get a lot of sleep. Los Angeles, the international headquarters, doesn't really matter. So I'm pretty sure that the person who drove me up, I want to say it was either Cheryl who drove me up, or no, it was actually a woman by the name of Renee Norton. She was the executive over the personnel department at the time, which was called like the supercargo. Right. And Renee Norton drove me up, and I think I fell asleep in the car when we were on the way to the base. So we're like, oh, we're going to the Ant base. And I was like, oh, great. How long do you think it's going to be? And she said, oh, we'll get there when we get there. You're not even supposed to discuss the length of the drive to the Ant base, because then somebody could just go, okay, if you went 65 miles an hour for this long, so it must be in this area somewhere. So
it's about 90 minutes. So people know it's a 90-minute drive. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, with traffic in LA, it could be a 3 or 4 hour drive.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which I often made it do if I had to go between because, why not? But yeah, I think Renee Norton drove me up there. And when we arrived, I was my brain was almost about to break. When we arrived, like I could see, like the road was getting a little bit bumpy. We were going down, we went from Los Angeles, so we took the 101, I think, to the 10. And we took the 10 almost the entire way. The 10, Interstate 10, the 10 freeway or the Interstate 10, I-10. We took that up to we got off at Beaumont, or we got off Jackrabbit Trail or Gilman Springs, whatever the exit is, and then we drove this really rough road. And when we did that, it was bumpy, and I was like, oh, we must be there. Now it's dark. We left at like 7 or 8 o'clock at night in Los Angeles. So we're getting there. It's like 9 or 10 o'clock at night. It's dark. And as we pull up to the international headquarters, there's a giant sign on the highway that says Golden Era Productions. And I'm like, okay, so let me get this straight. This fucking place is a secret. You don't want anybody to know where it is, but there's a motherfucking LED sign on the highway that says tours welcome and Golden Era Productions. And I'm like, huh? Like, it was bewildering to me.
This next part of the story revolves around me and Marc Headley. Actually, we were passing like 2 ships in the night, like I mentioned earlier. I was on my way out because I was getting fed up with David Miscavige and some of the abuses. He physically attacked me during the summertime in 1990 and also separated me from my wife at the time. Marc Headley was brand new up there at 17 years old and just getting involved with the high-speed cassette copy line. And there had been a problem with the copy line in the spring of 1990, where David Miscavige felt that the copies that were being produced of L. Ron Hubbard's lectures were not up to his demanding specifications. The equipment that we purchased, it was all up to factory specifications, meaning it was tuned up, ready to go, just the way that the factory liked it. But he had impossible standards that he wanted them to exceed factory standards. And so he had the different technicians work on improving the performance of the audio copying equipment. Well, a bunch of tapes were recorded, and when he listened to them, they were not up to his snuff, and he shut down the entire production line. And over $300,000 of already produced tapes were basically junked and gotten rid of. And he demanded that this production line, it's called the Gauss high-speed copy line, that it be solved by the technicians. And I was overseeing that as part of his office. And so we had all the technicians in the manufacturing building at Gold working around the clock for weeks and weeks and weeks trying to tune this equipment. There is a large master machine, and then there were 16 copy machines that are called slaves, and they all had to be tuned to his specifications until he liked them and would pass them. And this went on for weeks and weeks and weeks, and nothing could get done, and nobody could do anything. We couldn't produce any cassette tapes. People were not getting any sleep. And Golden Era Productions' income was drastically cut across by Miscavige due to his high demands. Of course, Marc Headley was brought up there to help as part of the technicians and part of the production line. And so he's going to go into the beginnings of this when he and I first met and when he was up at the base. And then he's going to go into detail about what happened on this high-speed production line and how he eventually became the quality control person for the line. I think you'll find this interesting. There were like 2 ships passing in the night.
We really were. When I first got there,
he arrived.
Yeah.
I was on my way out the door for good.
When I was first there, you were still walking around.
Oh, yeah.
And for those who don't know, if you're in Golden Era Productions, there's about 10 different organizations at the international headquarters. Like even different corporations and different DBAs and different each different organization had a different a class. It was like, if you're in Golden Era Productions, that's the lower class. That's the lowest class of Sea Org member at the end of base. And then there's CMO Gold, CMO Int, Exec Strata, L. Ron Hubbard Personal Public Relations Office, Exec Strata, WDC, all these different ones. And they go up to RTC. And then even in RTC, it goes, there's a bunch of different divisions, and then there's COB's office, and that's the highest you can be. And so Mark his job was corporate liaison in charge, or CLIC. And and that was about as high as you could get, besides being David Miscavige. Like, you knew that, oh, that dude's boss is David Miscavige. That's it, you know? So when you would come around, I was always like, oh, whatever we do, this guy's telling Dave about it. So you better mind your P's and Q's when this guy walks around. And also, you were
a pretty good guy. I was a pretty good guy, though, right?
You were very kind of like, you were very conversational in terms of an executive. Most executives, including like, the guy that was the boss of me in that place, his name was Jason Bennick. And he was a really short, oh yeah, there he is. That guy, he doesn't look like that anymore. He doesn't have any hair. It's all shaved.
By the way, that picture is my wedding, and he's standing behind me because he worked for me at that time, and he was the best man in my wedding. So
wow. Is that also at the ship?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah.
Up where the forecastle, up where the forecastle, the front of the ship was.
That is where that ping pong picture is in that exact spot. So you could get married there. You could you could play ping pong. Yeah. We had Jason Bennick was my boss, and he was there all day, pretty much, so we talked about before, they made all those overt product cassettes, all the bad quality cassettes. And every night, all of the Golden Era Productions crew would come to the area where they made the cassettes. And there it is. That's Building 36. So those windows that are not covered by trees on the first floor, you can see right in between those two big trees, there's like 1, 2, 3 windows. That is where the cassettes were made. Those 3 windows are where the cassettes were produced.
And these were L. Ron Hubbard lectures that were sold to all Scientologists all over the world. So that's what the cassettes were. They were recorded cassettes that we would package and then sell. Go ahead. Yeah.
So every day, all of the crew from Golden Era Productions would come into this area, and we would put the cassettes through a heat tunnel and warm them up, and then peel the paper labels off of them, and then use alcohol to clean off any adhesive residue. And then those cassettes were sold like in Los Angeles to be able to record stuff on. Yeah, they'd sell them for like 5 cents or something like that each. These cassettes cost about $1 each because they had this special kind of metal. TDK was the brand, and they made a very special formulation that had metal in it that would just have a better dynamic range of sound. It just had it was
the best quality. The best quality cassette tape you could have was TDK metal, and
that's right.
Everything had to be the best on these things.
Yeah, it was called TDK MA. I think that stood for metal alloy. And we would buy the cassettes, these giant reels of tape, and it was on a hub, and that hub would snap into the machines that would do the high speed recording, and you could fit about that's it, Gauss, the name of the company that produced the master machine and the slave machines. Right. You would play a master of the L. Ron Hubbard lecture. It was like a 1-inch. Was it a 1-inch? I think it was.
Yeah, it was a production master. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to say it was a 1-inch master, and the master was recorded at regular speed. And the master would be on this thick tape that would play through this master machine in high speed. And it would play it at 32 times high speed. And these slave recorders would record the sound coming out of the master at 32 times speed as well. And so, yeah, that's a slave. It's called a Gauss or C-Tech Gauss pancake recording slave. And you can see you put on the pancake on the left side there, and then you thread it through this thing and you wrap it around the right side, and then you put it in like standby mode and record, and then the master spins up, and once it's to speed, there's a little piece of foil at the head of the lecture, and as soon as that foil goes by, it tells all the machines it's time. And then they get up to speed, and then they all start recording. And so these machines were broken. And that's why they produced all these lectures that didn't sound good.
When you say broken, okay, they were at factory specification, right? But that was not good enough for David Miscavige on L. Ron Hubbard's lectures. They had to be better than factory specifications, okay? And basically, he would listen for the finest little problem or issue, whereas the normal consumer doesn't care about that. And that was what the problem was. So these guys, you guys were the people in there were trying to get these machines to better than factory specifications to David Miscavige's ears, quality, saying is okay. And it was insanity in terms of, because it was going around the clock 24 hours a day for weeks.
Yeah.
Weeks, right?
So I'm going to try to explain that, but in layman's terms, if you have a master recording and then you make copies of it, you want the copy to sound as good as the master, or as good as it can, to the master. And most people, they have like, the way that we tested and the way everything was based is that there's a frequency range that goes from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. So 20 Hz to 20 kHz. And all of these individual frequencies in that range exist on the master. And then when you make the copy, you want it to be around the same level. All of those frequencies, if they're at this level on that recording, you want them to be at that level on the copy. And so the way they would explain it was, it's this frequency range plus or minus 3 or 4 decibels.
Decibels, dB.
Yeah. And the machines could do plus or minus 3 to 4 decibels all day long. That was fine. You could do that. For David Miscavige, that additional decibel was unacceptable. So instead of having it plus or minus 3 or plus or minus 4, it was his requirement that every copy be plus or minus no more than 2 dBs on certain frequencies and no more than a dB and a half on the frequencies which you can hear. So the frequencies which most people can't hear, he was like, okay, those could be plus or minus 2. But the ones that most people can hear, the ones that are in my voice right now and that you're hearing on this recording, he wanted those frequencies to not be more than plus or minus 1.5 decibel. So my job was that on the master recording, there's a bunch of tones that are on that master recording. And they're only at the very, very end of the pancake. So all of those copies are going by and recording the lecture. And when that little piece of foil goes by, it tells the master, don't play these tones on the tape. So the slaves never hear them. the slaves only hear them on the last time it's going to go around. It says, okay, put those tones down. And so then when you get the pancake, I would thread it onto my machine, and right there at the very end of the recording would be those tones that were on the master tape. And I would use a spectrum analyzer and a bunch of different Hewlett-Packard 400 FL voltmeter to see what the level tone was. And then I'd use the spectrum analyzer to analyze the pink noise and what those were. And then I would create a graph of that frequency range, and then I would print it out on a sheet. And the sheet had an area where those frequencies could be already pre-printed onto the paper. So when I printed out the graph, it would plot the frequencies within the zone it should be. And if it wasn't in that zone, then I would flunk it. And I would say, that's not okay. It's got to go back. Okay, so...
Well, just to put it in practical terms, okay?
Yeah.
Because I've had a long time to think about this, right?
Yeah.
Miscavige was checking these things with the highest quality headphones that existed. They were called Stax headphones. Anyway, he's listening to them on these really super high quality. So he's like splitting hairs, okay?
Oh, yeah.
And he set up this whole thing where you had to quality control all this stuff. And you did an excellent job in all that stuff, right? But the average consumer, they didn't really care. You're listening to L. Ron Hubbard from 1962 pontificate about something, and as long as you can hear him, who cares? You know what I mean? It was like it was good quality. Everything was quality. Tape, cassette shells, everything was like that. But like, because his standards were so high, right?
Yeah,
that's why all this stuff happened.
Well, that was also just the first checkpoint,
right?
So it would get so you would have the we had 16 of these slave machines.
Slaves. Yeah.
So you'd have one master, and an L. Ron Hubbard lecture is usually about 45 minutes on side one, and then 45 minutes on side two. So when you have a cassette, you're recording, and this is a crazy thing too. You're recording side one forward, but you're recording side two backward. So it's kind of wild, technique when you think about it. But that master is playing side one, two channels of side one going forward. It's playing side two going backwards, and the slaves are recording whatever they're getting. And then, so then when you check it, I would check the tones, make sure those are good. And as long as they were good, then the pancake would be marked a pass, and it would be put in a pile, a stack, and all the passes would add up, and all the flunks would add up. And then the ones that flunked would go and get erased, and then we could reuse those again. Eventually, when we ran out of tape, we would use all the flunks. We'd erase them and then use those to record again. But
but that's why I left. I mean, this line, they were trying to get this Gauss line to David Miscavige's standards. And literally, people like Bruce Plotz, Gary Lou, all these people, and up all night around the clock for weeks. At the same time, the flood had happened at the base in August of that summer, right? So there was a mission that was in there that was causing all this stuff. And I basically got to the point where I was getting in trouble because, they weren't reaching Miscavige's standards. And I just got to the point where I went like, the hell with this. This is never going to happen. And so that was when I was like, adios, I'm out of here, after he beat me up. And there's other things that happened too. But
and some of those, well, that time when he beat you up is in my book. The person who was the Audible QC was my boss. Her name was Linnea, and Linnea used to be in the CL office in RTC, and she got busted, and then she went into the tapes department at the same time I did. She wasn't there when I got there. She was busted out of RTC after I got there, and then assigned to be my boss. And she was a nightmare for me, because here I am. I'm a brand new Sea Org member. I'm a teenager. I want to say I was 17 at this point. I just had my birthday when I got to the Imp base. I got there like a day or two after my birthday, or a few days after my birthday. I was 17 years old. And she was in her like late 20s, but she was in Religious Technology Center. So she was in the highest Sea Org organization directly under David Miscavige, but also she got busted. So if somebody in RTC gets in trouble and they get assigned to Golden Era Productions, they sort of have to prove themselves as the best Sea Org member they can be. So they're very strict and very by the book according to L. Ron Hubbard policies and flag orders and all these other things. And here I am like, whatever, what are you gonna do? And she would have none of it. Anyway, so she was my boss, and she was the tapes QC. And I was the Pancake QC, and I also did Audible QC, and she was the day shift Pancake QC, held from above. If you in the Sea Org, if you do a job that's under you, you do that job HFA, held from above. So she was the day shift Pancake QC, and then she was also the Audible QC, and then I was the night shift Pancake QC, and then I became what was called Quality Control Gold. And I was the QC over all of Golden Era Productions, including Linnea, which was kind of weird in the end. But so what had happened after you left was, and also when it was funny when I would write to somebody that wasn't at Golden Era Productions, because if I would write to somebody that I needed something from Los Angeles, it would be from Pancake QC, Golden Era Productions. People are like, wow, international headquarters must be amazing. They got people checking their pancakes for them to make sure they're like, got enough maple syrup on them or something. It's just like it's a so out of context thing. Right. And even people at the base, they'd be like, what do you Pancake do? QC, you here? And I'd be like, yep, right here, Pancake QC, It was the most bizarre Sea Org post title ever. And oh, by the way, anybody out there wondering, I have quality checked a pancake or two in my time. Not the tape ones. Not the tape ones.
And I quality control checked quite a few pancakes in my day as well at the restaurants. Anyway, in this next section, you're actually going to find out what the solution was that solved the problem. Now, I had left by this time. In September 1990, September 15th, 1990, I escaped for the final time, threatening to go to the police if they did not give me my car and my stuff. And so I was not there when this final solution came about. And you're going to hear what that final solution is. And I actually did not know until I talked to Mark about it, what actually was the solution. And you're going to be surprised as to what it is. There were other things going on at that time as well, which is why I left. Like Mark had mentioned, there had been a mission that was sent in, very heavy ethics and very heavy abuses being done to the Gold staff because of the high-speed copy line, but also the flood that happened, and where people, if you did not show up on time at muster, you were sent to the RPF immediately, the Rehabilitation Project Force, that people were made to march all over the property. There were all sorts of things that were done. People were losing sleep and not eating, and it was very, very draconian punishment that Miscavige was overseeing during this time period until they solved this Gauss, the high-speed copy line, situation. And the whole base, as Marc Headley mentioned, had been assigned a condition of confusion. This is the Gold and Era production staff. The RTC and the Commodore's Messengers, they did not. They weren't part of it. But Golden Era Productions was. And so it was a really heavy time. And I had enough. And so when I finally decided I'm going, I thought, he's crazy. Miscavige is crazy. His standards are crazy. He's not following L. Ron Hubbard policy. And I'm going to go crazy if I stay. So I left. But anyway, in this section here, you're going to hear Marc Headley talk about the solution and what happened with the high-speed copy line.
because we were doing something that had never been done before.
Right.
The machines themselves.
You were exceeding the factory specifications.
Yeah, the machines themselves could, they could reproduce a quality signal, but not as tight as David Miscavige wanted it. So in the end, and this is the funniest thing, in the end, they had figured out how to get the circuit board to do what we wanted, but tuning it was the problem. And it was very rookie stuff that was happening. And essentially what it boiled down to in the end, this is the stupidest thing, but this is what it was. It was the temperature of the room. That was it. The temperature of the room was the problem. They had they had moved. This Gauss line had been operating for years and years and years in another location.
Right.
Well, they built this brand new building. It had fancy new air conditioning. Right. And anyone in the electronics world where you want to keep that in the 70s, low 70s or below. And so they had this place on 69 all the time. And that's what it was, just cold in there. Yeah. Well, they would open these windows, those windows that I showed you, that you put up, those three little windows in that manufacturing building, they'd have those blinds open right there. Those ones right in the middle, those three ones on the first floor that are blocked, okay? Those, the sun would come in and it'd heat everything up. And then we do all these tests. We do all these frequency. We just had tones. We're just recording. We had a master tape that just had tones, and that was just playing full time. And it was going out to the slaves. And what would happen is we would tune the slaves to that tone. We'd make sure it matched. And if this frequency was high, there was a little thing you could adjust, and you could change. You couldn't change individual frequencies, but you could change like the low frequencies, you could change the mid frequencies, and you could change the high frequencies. And you just had a little potentiometer that would either make those go up or down. And so we'd spend the whole day tuning everything, getting it all perfect, all into the night. And till 6 o'clock in the morning. And then we get everything perfect. And then we go to bed for a few hours. We get up, 8:30, come in, and everything would be totally different. And no one could figure it out. And so what you had the air conditioner itself just being colder or hotter. And then you'd have the sun and just the outside temperatures affecting everything. And then it was also, maybe we had to move a bunch of tape in. And so we'd prop the doors to the Gauss line open into the finishing area where the loading dock was connected to and all that. And we'd be bringing a bunch of stuff in. And then all of a sudden, all the slaves on that side of the room would have a totally different tuning.
Wow.
And so it really took about, I'm going to say it took about August or September, maybe, for them to really figure that out. It took months for them to go, oh, it's the temperature. And we put all these thermometers all around the room. And then they ended up just ripping out the air conditioning system that was part of the building. And they put in a very, very special air conditioning system just for that room.
Voila, the solution was finally found. Marc continues to say, when Gold got out of their condition of confusion by producing 50,000 tapes a week, an almost impossible feat, and he goes into details about that. One of the things that he also mentions that we're going to talk about as well in this next section is how many L. Ron Hubbard cassette lecture series that Gold would produce after that. and how that related to the actual number of people that were in Scientology. And I think you'll be surprised by the numbers that he is going to throw out there, because it's pretty revealing in terms of how many people were involved in Scientology. We then go into David Miscavige, his impossible standards, how he's always was behind the eight ball in terms of technology. In other words, he wanted to do TDK metal cassette tape when the world had gone compact disc and then later DVD. The same thing with movies. Oh, we're going to still film on film, do the movies on film stock as opposed to digital cameras, wasting millions of dollars on a film laboratory that is basically a white elephant just sitting there at Golden Era Productions to this day. And then also talk about his personal stereo system, which is over $200,000 if it's not more, at all the different locations where he has offices. And we tell stories about that too.
Anyway, but in Thanksgiving of 1990, we produced 50,000 cassettes, and then the whole entire property was approved to be not in lower conditions. So that's how big of a deal this little area with like 10 people in it is the entire property was being punished because we could not make 50,000 cassettes in a week. And the most ridiculous thing in the end of all this is that they sold about 1,000 cassettes a week the entire time I was there. So we were
stocking shelves.
You think those dudes before us, they wasted $300,000 because the cassettes were bad? We produced millions of cassettes that were never sold.
Right.
And they had to trash them in the end because the entire thing is taking place in 1990. CDs had been out for a decade. A decade. CDs had been around, and these guys we're basically like hot rodding Model A's. Okay, yes. We're hot rodding Model A's. Like, you can go just buy a Dodge Charger for a lot less time and money, and you'll go faster than that Model A.
And that's the insanity of David Miscavige. It's like he always was, way behind the times of what's going on. I mean, CDs were just happening, and we're trying to put out these TDK metal tapes. As a matter of fact, the photographs that I showed you of the Gauss line, this equipment here, I showed this stuff to you, right?
Yeah.
These photos, when I found them, I had to look them up on Google. They came from the Museum of Magnetic Recording. They don't even use them anymore.
No. Even when we were doing all this, it was sort of like, what are you guys up to? Like, you could have a CD. Oh, and that's the other thing. These things cost $1 to produce. They're selling them for $75 each, these lectures. That's about the average cost of an L. Ron Hubbard cassette or lecture. It's about $75. You can produce a CD for less than a penny. And
the thing is that Miscavige had a CD player in his officer's lounge. It was the top of the line, state of the art CD player in his officer's lounge on his personal stereo.
Yeah,
and he remember those, right?
It was those Technique ones where the top popped up and you would place it. Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, this dude, I mean, everything's on the internet now. You can watch anything you want on a computer, phone, tablet. This dude just bought a TV studio. He just bought a TV station a few years ago. Like, dude, what's wrong with you?
After we left, you were still there. They built a film lab, obviously because they didn't want to, sending everything to Los Angeles for the rushes to be printed and brought back. And then they were like, we're going to film color separate. I remember the planning before this was built to save L. Ron Hubbard's crappy films.
Yeah.
We're going to separate. So they built a state-of-the-art film laboratory for millions of dollars on that property. And then they don't even shoot on film anymore. They're using digital cameras and stuff like that. It's a complete waste.
Well, even the fact that we did, I mean, we spent millions and millions of dollars on producing these cassettes, which I'm going to say 90% of it was waste. Like when we would make these sets of lectures, we would produce, like, let's say a L. Ron Hubbard lecture set has 20 lectures in it. So that's 20 cassettes. We have a binder that holds 10 cassettes on this side, then 10 cassettes on this side, and a big, thick transcript of all the lectures and a glossary and all this stuff.
They were packaged very nicely.
Yeah, but now here's a key thing. A lot of Scientologists don't know this. And I bet you if they knew this, they'd be like, what? When we produce those lecture sets, you know how many we would produce? We would produce 1,500. That was the amount we would produce. 1,500. Scientology is saying they have 10 million members. And when they have an international release of a lecture thing, we've produced 1,500 copies of that lecture series. And sometimes we'd go wild and we'd produce 5,000 and they'd sell 300. And then those 4,700 would just sit around. Or they'd sell them to the Scientology organizations. Like they'd say that 1,500, they'd divide that into all the Scientology. So like this organization has to buy 5, and this one has to buy 6, and this one has to buy 10. And so they'd suck up that 1,500, and then we'd produce another 1,500. So we had some in case they needed some more. And a lot of times we'd never run out of that second batch of 1,500. Like they wouldn't have sold the first batch, and maybe 1 or 2 ones here or there would order new ones. So it was sort of like David Miscavige picked that 50,000 figure based on how much the machine could make, not how much his machine could sell. And that is actually how he does everything. He says, oh, well, we can't get Scientology to expand because the organizations are crappy and they're in a strip mall or whatever. And they may be pumping 100 people through that little strip mall location a week. And so they raise $10 million. 20 years later, they're in this big, giant ex-museum of a facility, and they're pumping 10 people through a week now. And you're like, you would have been better off in the strip mall next to the dog groomer. You were doing just fine back then.
And the thing is that, you know, it wasn't just Miscavige. L. Ron Hubbard also was a complete audiophile, if you will.
Well,
okay.
Yeah.
All the equipment and the production lines at Golden Era Productions, audio wise, I oversaw and had to set up. I had no background in it whatsoever, but I got people like Gary Liu and John Horowitz and Steve Marlowe and all these, Ken Mortensen, these people to set these things up. Why? And Hubbard, really high quality. And they were really high quality, but they wasted millions of dollars on this stuff, right? He produced this album. It's one of the crappiest albums or music you've ever heard in your life, called The Power of Source, The Apollo Stars. And that's him over there sitting next to Dan Arbach recording the stuff. And Miscavige was the same way. Miscavige had to have what, a couple $100,000 personal stereo QC line in his officer's lounge, right?
He has that in every single country and every single location. Yeah, no,
we had to set that stuff up. It was ridiculous, you know?
Yeah, he has, I want to say David Miscavige has over $10 million of personal office equipment between his various offices, just in terms of the equipment to just play back cassettes or play back CDs or play back a DVD. He might have a $200,000 speaker system in that office. And that's not the tape player and the cassette and the TV. No, I'm just talking about the amps and the speakers. That's $200K per office. And he's got UK, the Freewinds, RTC, OSA or HGB, ASI, LKDs, SPTV, KCET or whatever they call the SMP, Scientology Media Productions. Anyway, he has and this is sort of like his hobby horse in Scientology and the Sea Org.
Mark, you don't know this, but one of our duties was if he was going to the officers' lounge, we would have to go down there 15 to 20 minutes before to turn on the amps because there were tube amps because they had to heat up.
They need
Before
to
he
warm
could
up.
listen to these things.
Yeah.
So that was one thing. He's going to go down to the officers' lounge. We've got to go down and turn on those amplifiers.
Were those Manleys back then?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the story about the high-speed copy line and David Miscavige's stereo. We've got more stories from Marc Headley that I'm going to put into another video for you in the near future. In the meantime, we hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe to our channel. Hit that notification button. It helps us get the message out to other people that are out there. And we just want to thank you all for watching. It's summertime. Janice is out and about traveling right now, so I'm doing these videos right now on my own. If you have any questions or comments, please go down below in the comments question section. Of course, I always check those and answer them. And then if you want to support the channel, there's a link in the description. You can buy us a coffee. Just click on that and you follow the instructions there. And we appreciate this support. The other thing for Janice I wanted to mention is don't forget her complete liquid multivitamins from Outback Natural. I use them every day. They're fantastic. You just drink it in a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons or a shot glass, and they're peach flavored. You keep it cold. It's the easiest way to take your vitamins, and it's very, very effective. And you don't have to swallow a ton of pills. This has all your daily multivitamins in this liquid vitamin from Outback Natural. So please, if you're interested in that, all you have to do is go down in the description, go to our merchandise store, click on it, and it's available there. You can purchase it there, and she'll ship it out to you in the United States. This is available in the US. So just wanted to mention it, our complete liquid vitamins for Janice. I hope you enjoyed the show. I've got new editing software. You'll notice new music as well. And we're trying to upgrade the show as best we can going forward. I hope you enjoy the changes. Until next time, everybody. Bye-bye.